Okay, everybody, here's a review video for the 50-point exam that we have coming up. Be able to know what sub-elites are. This exam is going to cover federalism, the 1900s, the progressive era, week 5, which is World War One and ideologies, and then week 6, which is you know voting in political parties. So make sure you understand that the exam's going to cover weeks 3 to 6, so 4 weeks, and it'll start off with week 3, which is federalism. So know what sub-elites are. Basically, sub-elites are going to be those state and local government elites that control things, not necessarily on the federal level. Obviously, people trust local government more than federal government, and we kind of discussed that. People might have more confidence because these people may be inside of our community, so we're able to reach them. Know that we have 86,000 governments here in the United States, and most of them are going to be on the local level. Know what delegated powers are. Those are the 18 enumerated powers in the Constitution that Congress has. You don't have to know specifically every single one, but know generalities, right? Know what some powers that the federal government has that the state doesn't have. Like coining money, control over the military. Know what some state and special and local duties are. The state is responsible for administrating social welfare programs. The local government is in charge of implementing those programs and checking eligibility. Know what the 10th Amendment is. Remember, the 10th Amendment, any power that the states get is permissible as long as they don't infringe on the enumerated powers that Congress has, nor if they can't pass laws that are unconstitutional. All right? And know that the 14th Amendment guarantees everybody equal protection under the law in the state. So states can't deny people equal protection under the law. Know the differences of federalism. Know what marble cake federalism is. Know what layer cake federalism is. Remember, layer cake was first, where duties were specifically split between federal, state, and local government. Know marble cake, where there's instances where the federal government will share powers with the state government, like highway maintenance or education or criminal justice. And know the time periods of those. So, dual federalism, marble cake federalism, layer cake federalism, basically those metaphors. Don't worry about Obamacare. There was a federal mandate before. Do know what a federal mandate is. A federal mandate is more analogous with kind of something like the Americans with Disability Act, where we have the federal government that gives directives on how to, make places accessible for disabled people. And there's no money that comes from the federal government to do that. So businesses and state and local governments are responsible for coming up with their money to be able to provide those services. So a federal mandate or kind of an example, of course, of federalism is where the federal government will give a directive to state government or local government, even a private business, that they have to follow some type of law, but they have to pay for that on their own. If we kind of go consistent with what we talked about with regards to the 1900s, remember the 1900s, we saw a lot of people get rich. The Bessemer Project was one of those things that, it converted iron to steel, which was used for skyscraper ships and all those things. And then the 17th Amendment was passed as part of the progressive era, which we'll talk about in a minute, where we directly elect senators now, as opposed to the state legislatures electing senators. Okay, let's go ahead and check out the progressive era. So remember, we have the spoils system. That was when people ran for a elected official post, and their supporters would support them. If that person would win, then they would grant the supporters jobs, and it led to inefficiency, it led to corruption, it led to the building of machines, right? Don't worry about the Homestead Act. Go ahead and disregard that one. Know what laissez-faire economics is, and how laissez-faire economics is hands off the economy, letting the economy guide itself, kind of that John Locke, Adam Smith type feeling with regards to the economy. Know a little bit of Roosevelt Square deal and some of the things that were came out of the Square deal. Know the Elkins Act, the Sherman Act, the Meat Inspection and Pure Food and Drug Act. Just basically the little definitions, not the whole core of the act. Just know what it was put into place. Know the 16th Amendment. Obviously, the 16th Amendment instituted the federal income tax. 17th Amendment, we talked about, provided the public the ability to vote for their senators. The 18th Amendment, which was prohibition, which was eventually repealed. And the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. Know the Panama Canal and the Hague-Ponsafforti Treaty of 1901 and the purposes of the Panama Canal. Remember, we kind of made the thought that the canal was a quicker passage for ships as opposed to going all the way around South America to get to the west coast of the United States. If you want to go from the east coast to the west coast or vice versa, the Panama Canal saved a lot of time because you could take a shortcut through that canal. That canal was eventually given to Panama, right? Know the Platt Amendment, just the generalities, and don't worry about number 12. Don't worry about the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. We didn't really get too much into that. So let's look at chapter 5, or week 5, sorry. So we talked a little bit about World War I. Know the causes, how the Archduke was assassinated. Kind of the Wilsonian 14 points. Remember, we talked about that. Don't know them. Don't specifically expect you to know every single one of them, but know the generalities of it and how, Wilson wanted to spread democracy throughout the world. And we had a pretty good conversation about whether or not the United States should act as the world police. Interest groups, know what a PAC is. What are they? What do they do? Who contributes to them? Know what access is, and how the most important thing in lobbyists has is access. And a lot of former members of Congress become lobbyists because they have direct access, right? Meaning that you have members of Congress's cell phone numbers, you have their email address, you may have their chief of staff's cell phone number, you may have their email address. So you kind of already have that relationship that's built in. It's something that you don't have to build again. Know what... where lobbying takes place. Lobbying will generally take place in Congress and the executive branch, on state legislatures, not necessarily in the judicial branch. Kind of going back to World War I, know what the Selective Service Act did. Know the things that lobbyists can bring and some of their advantages that they have. They have expertise on issues. They know the legislative process. They could tell where maybe an interest group stands on an issue, so those things are important. Know what the regulatory requirements of disclosure is. Both lobbyists and the people that receive money have to report to the government how much they spend or how much they receive. Know that the Democratic Party relies more heavily on labor unions and lawyers for funding than the Republican Party. Know that the Republican Party gets a lot of their money from real estate in the financial sector. Know what single issue interest groups are. Know that the largest number of PACs come from corporations. And PACs will generally give their monies to incumbents. Because, remember, incumbents have the best chance of winning. Remember, incumbents win about 90% of the time. And all of this activity, especially under Citizens United, remember, Citizens United basically says that corporations can spend unlimited amounts of money to defeat a candidate or to support a candidate as long as that candidate does not coordinate. Remember when we saw the Stephen Colbert video, how They kept emphasizing that as long as the candidate doesn't coordinate with the super PAC, everything is legal, and they contribute as much money as they want because that activity is protected by the First Amendment. Know that the population, at least, most of the population belongs to some type of interest group. Generally, most of the population belongs to at least one interest group, so that's something that I wanted to also highlight. And know what single issue interest groups are, and how these people that are part of single issue interest groups generally are very, very committed to their cause. Know about Stephen Colbert in the video that we watched and how he gave his super PAC to Jon Stewart. And all that activity through that Citizens United decision is protected by the First Amendment. Okay, we talked a little bit about, kind of ideological interest groups. Just know the generalities. We talked about the farm workers movement, trade association interest groups, women interest groups, like now is the biggest feminine interest group here in the United States. We have civil rights interest groups like the the NAACP, which is the oldest interest group, the Urban League. So just know the generalities of that. LGBTQIA, GLAAD is a big one. And lobbyists have to report. So that's the important thing. They have to report any money that's donated or any money that's given. And we looked at that Open Secrets website that showed that. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So we talked a lot about ideologies. Know what classic liberalism is and how a classic liberal will kind of adhere to that John Locke philosophy where we have small government, a protection of individual rights, and that laissez-faire economics system that they believe in. Know what a modern conservative is for? A modern conservative will be against things like maybe bilingual education, and they place a high value on nationalism. Know what modern liberalism and how is that generally a left-leaning ideology, and how we see greater equality. Know what modern conservatism is, like we talked about. Maybe somebody that's in favor of increasing defense spending, reducing taxes on higher earners, engaging in military action if it's authorized. Know what a libertarian is? Remember, libertarians are going to be liberal on social issues and economically conservative. As part of modern liberalism as well, know that we live off of a merit-based society through liberal eyes, and that's the core value. Know what reactionary groups are and how groups like the Taliban and the Nazis are considered reactionary or fascist type groups. All right, so understand that. So going to voting. Elections and voting. Remember, people don't necessarily vote based off of a candidate's policy. That's a myth, right? So most voters are going to vote based off of retroactive voting. Remember, kind of what have you done for me lately? And also candidate image of a person is charming or handsome or what good looking, well spoken. They're going to be able to get votes based off of that. Know what de-alignment is versus realignment. Remember, de-alignment is when a group detaches them, or when a person detaches themselves from a party and becomes an independent. Know what realignment is. Remember, I spoke about the Catholics who have migrated from the Democratic Party. They were a staple of the Democratic Party in the 50s and 60s, but in the 70s and the 80s, we started to see a realignment due to a lot of social issues. So understand what realignment is. Know what the responsible party system means, and remember, remember that parties cannot hold no direct means in holding their public officials responsible for not carrying out the policies. So there's really no direct means of kind of punishing people who don't fulfill their campaign promises. Remember, know how to win elections. Remember, the political parties and his goal is always to win elections. In order to do that, you need to look at the medium voter theorem. Where you move yourself along the ideological spectrum from your ideology toward the center, toward the middle. That way, you are able to attract the people in the middle. You go as far as you can to the middle to attract those voters without alienating your base, right? So if you're a liberal, you'll move yourself along the ideological spectrum to attract those voters that are in the middle, but you cannot go so far to the middle that you alienate your base. Know that the Libertarian Party is the most successful third party here in the United States. And usually third parties here in the United States really don't get any traction because they're not on every ballot in the U.S. Remember, the Libertarian Party is only on 33 ballots here in the U.S. Know that generally you have about a 60% participation rate in the presidential election, around the 30% in primary elections. Remember, the primary elections are going to be generally held from March to June. Those are the occasions when a president nominee is not a candidate is nominated for president, and then the general election will happen in November, and that's where we have the vote. Know the demographics of the Democratic Party. Remember, women are more likely to be Democrats than men, and we talked about the reasons with that. Know what nativist parties are? Anti-Chinese, anti-Irish Catholic, anti-Mexican. And know the term Tweedledee and Tweedledum. We talked a little bit about that in class as well. All right? So that's what I got. Make sure you watch this video and then ask me any questions by email or by maybe in person. Just let me know and we can answer any questions. All right? Thanks a lot.